This is Zoe,
I'm Colette.
and we're debriefing on the different aspects of the Riddler and what we've presented to you today.
All right, so a little bit about the Riddler. So the Riddler's name is Edward Nigma. It's spelled two different ways. Sometimes it's Nygma, sometimes it's Nigma. His name is also Edward Nashon, depending on what version you're looking at. His background, he has an abusive father in a lot of stories who, after a competition where there was a riddle at school that he cheated and then won, his father accused him of cheating and of not being very smart and was just generally abusive towards him. And so Edward decided to take on this not decided to chose to take on like a persona of riddles and just devolved into a madness of needing to prove that he was smarter and that he could solve all these riddles and all of that. There's also versions like as the Riddler 2022 in which he's actually a destitute orphan, and so he is kind of mad at Gotham and society because of that. But generally, the abusive father tends to be the more prominent backstory for him. He has multiple motivating factors, as I said, that riddle competition in school that he won after cheating and studying the answers. He was accused of cheating, wants to prove himself wrong. There's also the fact that the riddles and puzzles themselves give him joy, and he likes finding the meaning in the chaos and the meaning of the riddles and finding meaning in the chaos around him. So by creating puzzles and riddles, he's giving himself control in like a really chaotic and dark world. So he's able to control at least that little part of his surroundings, which is why he creates all these riddles and puzzles instead of just committing a normal crime like a regular criminal would. That's what sets him apart. His family. He has a girlfriend that he strangled. He has a daughter that he murdered in some situations. Some versions he doesn't have a daughter at all. Some of them he didn't quite kill her, but she vanished for a while and came back and was presumed dead. Kind of a mess. DC's a mess. There's a lot of different versions, but generally his daughter's name is Enigma. She's up here on the top right. Top left, my bad. Top left. That she was murdered by the Riddler later on. He also has the abusive or dead parents, depending on which version we're looking at. He does have two sidekicks. Their names are Query and Echo. They're in the bottom left. They're not there a whole lot. There are in some. There's also one singular comic strip where he mentions having four sidekicks all named Mark, but that was really vague and there was not like anything at all on them. Some of his character traits, he's very overly confident. He's narcissistic, obsessive. He's very cryptic deliberately, which ties into his need to make puzzles and riddles out of everything. So he just deliberately obscures the meaning of things to make people think about it and have to try, figure out what he's saying. He just enjoys the thrill of the puzzle, so that kind of explains the crypticness. He likes creating and solving riddles and puzzles. He doesn't really have any super abilities. He's not like Poison Ivy where she can control plants. Instead, he simply just is smart, and that is the extent of his abilities. He's just a genius and has really great problem solving or creating, for that matter, skills. He has several different neurotic conditions. So he has obsessive compulsive disorder, which he really needs to create the puzzles and things. That's his entire personality, is just finding puzzles, finding meaning. Everything has to be exactly right. He won't commit a crime unless he can find a way to put it into a puzzle or riddle. So he has to have every little detail planned out. Narcissism, that goes back to one, his absolute lack of empathy and his overconfidence. Again, he thinks he's better than everyone because he's smarter than everyone, wants to prove that, and he doesn't really care who he hurts in the process. And finally, we got the psychosis, which is him in his inability to separate the falseness of the Riddler personality from Edward Nashton or Edward Nigma. They've become one in his mind, and his reality is distorted as a result of that. He can only see things for the riddles. He can't really see reality as reality should be. The dangerous tendencies, because of the narcissism and things, he lacks empathy. He enjoys forcing people to confront their morality, their ethics, their truth, all of those things, justice, through violence and threats of violence. So he will use blackmail, violence, murder, anything like that to make people think about what choices they can make, whether those choices are the best choices, whether or not reality is true, whether their truth is always truth, general things like that. He just uses violence, things like that, to force people to think because he wants people to see some of the truth in the chaos, if you will. That's his main tendencies that go along with those neuroses.
Some key philosophical and worldview influences is his riddles have a multiple answers that are somewhat correct and lack universal truth.
Which goes along with like any riddle in general. You can have multiple riddles, like there's riddles that end up like answers being like riverbeds, but it can also end up being like a lake bed, things like that. There's similar but not quite the same. Or there's like the common riddles like what's black and white and red all over. You can answer a lot of things. The obviously obvious answer is a newspaper, but you also could end up, if you're dark, with things like a dead zebra. You can answer things different ways. So there's different truths, even though the correct answer is truly a newspaper.
We use in the video the interrogation, the 6 and the 9. If you stand on one side, it's a 6. If you stand on the other side, it's a 9. It's all about perception. And he uses that, Edward Nygma uses that to his advantage to outsmart people in every right way and turn. Even in the newest movie, the 2020 version, we don't see the end until they show us. And it's through the ability of tricking what our perception is the entirety of the time.
One example in the 2022 Riddler film is the fact that there's the stool pigeon thing, El Rata. It can originally they think it's referring to the penguin. Then they find out that it's somebody else in the thing. I'm not going to spoil the ending, but there's a different criminal who also fits the description of like the rat with wings. There's a different villain that fits that category, which they don't realize until the very end that that was who was meant by it. Because there's multiple answers to that riddle if you don't read it right.
And that kind of leads into the metaphysics of it all. It's the questions of the reliability of the senses of reality. Is our perception, is our reality? You believe what you are going to believe through the physical aspects of it all. And that's what he really shows is he uses the different aspects around us, the universe we have created or have created for us, and he applies it to each criminal and to each riddle or to each thing that Batman has to deal with. The existential part of it all is the riddles are a search for significance and purpose in the chaotic world. But the riddles and crimes give a semblance of control and clarity to the riddle because he is the Riddler and there is that neurosis with him. He can't separate the idea. It's always a consistent battle. And with that consistent battle inside him, the control is trying to get better, to get another clue, to give another riddle, to try to get Batman to try to get him. It's always this consistent leading you forward, but not fully. And that control gives him this significance, this semblance of control that he doesn't really have. It's always a chase that he desires. And that kind of leads to Locke's ideas of humans as rational creatures and learning the virtue of free will. Riddler is the only one who he believes should have free will. No one else should have free will except for him. He's the puppeteer that's holding all the strings. He's the one that desires the control and wants to stay in control by posing questions. People want to figure things out, and he uses that to control them and to keep them on the hook the entire time. Batman falls into it every single time. Whenever he does a riddle, Batman follows the track, tries to follow, connect the pieces, make sure everything fits. But the Riddler gets that every time. He gets the endorphins from Batman trying to chase him. So he has the control. He's the one doing the puppeteering. And this results in all the diabolical schemes and actions as he forces celebrities and politicians to reveal crimes and secrets that they would die for, revealing their own life riddles in life, their own struggles, making Batman think through the things that he desires and things that he wants and things that he struggles with through each rendition in each movie. The one with Jim Carrey, for example, he presents himself to Two-Face and says, "Oh, wow, look at these two girls, the two different sides of you, the two different sections. One person is one person is this person. How could you ever choose what to do? I can give you this one thing. Are you going to face it or not?" And that was that whole exchange. And the Riddler forces Two-Face to even come with the reality of it all. And so it doesn't matter if it's just Batman, it's that consistent, I give you a life riddle that you might or might not solve, but I'm going to give it to you anyway, whether you like it or not.
In the 22 film, there was the blackmailing, at least the last celebrity. I'm not going to name which celebrity it was. Again, spoilers for that movie. But he blackmails that celebrity actually into the end of blowing himself up by refusing to divulge the secret identity of a rat, the rat that was the El Rata that I mentioned a little bit earlier. He forced that character to blow themselves up because they didn't want the consequences of revealing their life secrets, and he divulged all of the other ones up until that point, but because there was the risk to his family, to all of the things he cared about, he was not going to give up that secret identity of the anonymous person, like the tip-off person. So as a result, he ended up dying because he wouldn't devolve the thing and he didn't go along with Riddle's riddles. And by not going along with the Riddler, he ended up failing the test that Riddler had put before him.
And that's kind of what he thinks is justice. Justice to him is people following through. And in reality, to him, that will always be true. And so this kind of leads into his legacy is he acts as this private investigator to help Gotham and then returns back to crime.
With his legacies, there was the private investigator, which she just mentioned. So he was actually for a while there on like the straight and narrow, and was acting as private investigator to help uncover the lies and the truths. Like he wants to find the truth in Gotham and in the universe in general. So it makes sense that for a while he was a private investigator because he's all about finding that truth. He then returned to crime after I think it was Harvey that convinced him to go back to crime, but went back to the crime and went back to just creating riddles and puzzles and back into the thick of the evil. He tortured Batman with Jason Todd's death. Spoiler, that Robin dies. Sorry, he also is raised from the dead, but that's irrelevant. But he tortured Batman with Jason Todd's death because he figured out that Batman is Bruce Wayne. And so he used that to his advantage and just holds that over Batman's head, saying you could have saved him and didn't, essentially. He also floods Gotham and threatens to put or puts an atomic bomb in a stadium and then threatens to blow Gotham off the map, basically. But Batman stops that as well, but he's very violent and he just is constantly putting Batman in ethical scenarios. Like in the previous video, we mentioned the demonic ritual scenario where he tricked Batman into doing all these things like the tracheotomy. And there's a weird dance that he somehow managed to trick Batman into doing, and just a bunch of other things that he's putting Batman in odd scenarios that are morally ambiguous and then using that against Batman.
It's a consistent battle with the Riddler to always be the best and to always be the smartest of the room, whether it was from his parentage and always trying to be better than his father ever expected, or to outbetter himself and to always be in consistent battle with his internal desires and wants of always being intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why we believe the Riddler is not just and deserves to be behind bars.
True.